Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast. It's election day. We are coming off a massive 12-game slate on Monday night in the NBA. Buzzer beaters, overtime games, and the debut, long awaited, of James Harden, the newest member of the Los Angeles Clippers. 4 Los Angeles-based or Southern California-based stars all coming together, all late in their careers. An improbable, weird, disjointed conglomeration of talent that we've been waiting for months, ever since James Harden decided that Daryl Morey was a liar and he would never, ever play for the Philadelphia 76ers again. Ohm Youngmisuk, we were both at the game last night at Madison Square Garden. How are you?
What up, Zach? I am 25 floors up above Times Square, so I apologize. At any point, you might hear some Times Square activities coming in through my window.
So, 2 nights ago, as we awaited James Harden's debut, I was laying in bed, and as I am wont to do while laying in bed and unable to sleep, I was thinking about random NBA things. And a lightning bolt kind of hit my brain. I guess I would describe my reaction to the James Harden trade. I wrote a column about it. I did a podcast about it as, like, I get it. I don't love it. I don't think it like vaults the Clippers onto the Nuggets level. I don't think they're going to win the championship. I'm also not of the opinion that should be the bar for every trade. Like, you either make it because you're as good as Denver or you don't make it because you're not as good as Denver. I don't like that bar. I said they were better post-trade than they were pre-trade, and that alone I thought was like, okay, like, I get it. Don't love it. I get it. I was not going to slam it. And then I was laying in bed and I thought, my brain just thought, why are you and others so much less excited about this? And I'm on the more excited end of the continuum. I mean, like, there are a lot of people who just trashed this whole entire enterprise. Why am I so much less excited still than I was when James Harden last played with 2 superstars in Brooklyn, when I thought the team was like going to be unbeatable if they could just not get in their own way? And of course they got in their own way every which way they possibly could and broke up so fast that you barely remember the team even existed. That was James Harden as the point guard with 2 scorers around him. So why was that team like a no-brainer, like unbelievable team? And this one, I got all these questions. And yeah, Russ is part. And then you think, wait a second. And sure enough, sure enough, 3 different people within the Clippers organization yesterday brought that comparison up to me. That Brooklyn team, this Clippers team, why the differing reactions? And my response was, okay, I get it. But here's why. In the interim, we have experienced 2 more James Harden postseason meltdowns. 2 years have passed, which means everybody is 2 years older. We've had 2 James Harden trade requests and unhappy pouting his way out of teams, and 1 like soul-crushing postseason injury to Kawhi Leonard last season, his knee injury against the Phoenix Suns, where it's like, there's Kawhi's back. He's taking the ball from Kevin Durant and dunking. Oh my God. Sharktopus, Kawhi is back. Oh, he's injured. And that's the difference. And the other difference I was talking about with some of their basketball people was, Durant and Kyrie playing off Harden are like pretty thrilled to just let it fly, catch and shoot jumpers. And like, one of the big basketball questions about this team was, is Harden, when he's off the ball, going to take catch and shoot threes? He was 0 for 1 last night. Is Kawhi going to take catch and shoot threes? He was 2 of 4 last night. That's actually a lot for him. 5 between those 2 guys is not enough. And that's just even below all the just sort of general architecture of this team. Who's going to have the ball when? How is it going to flow? How do these puzzle pieces fit? That was my retort to both myself and the Clippers people bringing up the Kyrie, KD, Harden nets. Last night, you could read anything into it that you wanted. It was an ugly performance by the Clippers. They put up 97 points. They struggled to find any kind of rhythm offensively. They had 22 turnovers, several of which were just sort of sloppy, like, oh, we're not used to playing with each other. I threw the ball the wrong way. I threw the ball into the crowd. I threw the ball at Mitchell Robinson's hand 4 times. 18 offensive rebounds for the Knicks, and that is, to me, given the size of this team, an orange flag at the very least going forward. But were you want to be an optimist, there were little snippets here and there that you can point to and say, ooh, that's a roadmap to somewhere interesting. Ooh, that's a roadmap to somewhere interesting. Then you factor in Mason Plumlee's knee injury, which we're still waiting for the update on. But, obviously I'm a worst case scenario guy just in my general life. I'm bracing for bad news. How did you come out of this game? And in talking to Ty Lue and the other Clippers coming out of this game, how did they come out of this game? Where did they fall on this? Like, you can kind of see what you want to see thing from this game.
Well, I think one, you hit it right the nail on the head. I'm a big old school R&B fan, as you know, Zach. So I often lean on music that I like, and it just feels with the Harden fatigue and maybe Clipper fatigue combined with that you were feeling, it feels like, Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? I think that's what people see in James Harden. They see a disgruntled guy that they're probably over, complaining his way out of a team's. But listen, I think the Brooklyn thing was out of his control, because I remember being there with him at the start of that camp in San Diego, and James was happy. And then all of a sudden started deteriorating because Kyrie would not get vaccinated. And you could see James being like, what is going on around me? Being asked these questions about vaccinations every day. And all of a sudden that kind of deteriorated. So
And
obviously
I just turned down like a massive $200 million contract extension. That may have been, maybe that was a mistake. Oh, well.
Yeah, that was prior to that. I think that kind of was leading into that, because that was at the beginning of the month and he could still sign by the end. And remember, at the time, Sean Marks was saying, oh yeah, we're going to sign those guys. And all of a sudden they didn't. And then of course the Philadelphia thing left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And, look, this is a guy who averaged 10 assists per game the last 3 seasons, led the league in assists last year, yet people somehow don't view James Harden in that light. The Clippers, though, I think the unique thing about this trade is that Lawrence Frank had said the trade had been public for so long that it gave them time to digest what this trade would look like and really evaluate how he would fit in, more so than any other trade they've ever done. So they went back and did watch film of what he did. I think it was like, Lawrence, like, we understand it was like 16 games, but we watched it of how he fit in with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Well, and what the Clippers saw was a guy who was a willing passer, who kind of took a step back to those guys and was able to kind of just adapt with them. And then what they saw with Joel Embiid was a guy who led the league in assists. They, in Lawrence Frank's words, took pride in helping Joel Embiid get an MVP trophy. And I think what they, more than anything else, they saw, look, he's an elite passer. Like, this is a franchise that has been looking for an elite point guard to fill the shoes of Chris Paul ever since he departed that franchise when they traded him. And so, like, basically, yeah, they have Russell Westbrook, and Russell brings all the things that they still need, even with James Harden aboard, as far as leadership. He has been a leader ever since this offseason. The hustle, the energy, crashing the boards, the, kind of get in your face attitude to kind of bring up their energy level. He still brings all of those things. But Harden is the elite passer. And we saw a snippet of that last night. I know you like that pick and roll you saw with him and Zubats, where he just spun the ball around a defender and it curved into Zubats' hands. Zoo caught it. Thankfully, he didn't fumble it, then ended up drawing the foul. We didn't really see that again after that. We saw a lot of like I couldn't believe how many passes were deflected last night. It looked like basically
Mitchell Robinson was everywhere.
I mean, they look like a team that just kind of came together, and we understood that was going to happen. But there were a couple red flags to me. One, the rebounding issue. When they face a bigger team, they're going to be in trouble. Like, if you remember the loss at Utah, second game of the year, when Ty Lue went small, Lauri Markkanen killed them. Absolutely killed them on the inside. And even though I think all 4 of their stars are above average rebounders for their position, if they're dealing with a big like Mitchell Robinson, they're not going to get the rebound. So they got killed there. The turnovers was disturbing. It led to 35 points for the Knicks. But they were still doing well until Mason Plumlee got hurt. And this is a impactful injury for them. I mean, they need as many bigs as they can get, number one. Number two, Mason Plumlee, an underrated passer for them who can handle the ball. At one point, I think the Knicks took away the point guard option for them. Mason Plumlee brought the ball up the floor and actually started the play. Like, I watched this last night and I was like, Plumlee, man. Oh, yeah. So them losing him is big, and now they immediately need to scramble on the market to find whatever backup bigs they have. Number three, I think they have a major weakness as far as like they need a stretch big. Whether or not who that could be in the market, I know in the past I've always liked guys like Naz Reid, things like that. I'm not saying that's the answer to them winning a championship, but they do need that kind of guy because they just don't have one on the roster. But I think the four guys, like, James said he actually was winging it last night. He said, like, it was a weird feeling not being on a team and starting a season for him. Remember, this is a season opener for him, without having a training camp. So he said, I felt like I was just out there winging it. He said the game felt very fast in the beginning. He was a little out of shape. He was winded. He played 31 minutes, I believe. Ty Lue wanted to play him, I think 28, the plan was going in. He said, I told Ty Lue, no, let's do 30 to 34. And then, of course, all the starters got pulled with 4 minutes to go. So who knows what would happen if that was a tight game. Kawhi Leonard said, given the circumstances of what we saw and how he was still kind of working his conditioning, and he was like, the hardest thing to do is get your legs underneath yourself when you haven't played. He's like, besides that, I liked what I saw, and Paul George was very encouraged by what he saw. Now, Paul George took a step back. He finally cooled off after this all-star tear he's been on. I think he was like 2 for 10 last night, 10 points, didn't look good. He's the one that I worry about with the big four. Not that, his talent or anything like that. It's his mentality is that he wants everything to work. So, and he wants that so bad that he's the guy that could just say, I'm going to defer to these other guys. And I think Paul George is a guy that should not be deferring the way he's been playing this season. And probably Ty Lue should probably pair him a lot with Russell Westbrook, because I think there is such a comfort level between those two that those two kind of give each other confidence when they're together. And so far from that start of the season, you could see it. So I still feel optimistic about this playoff time. I know everybody's like, oh, you're going to see Harden kind of fall apart, things like that. They don't need James Harden, not to steal John Wall's, quotes from last year, but they don't need James Harden to be Batman. You know what I mean? They just need him to really kind of set up Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, get them open looks. And then offensively, I liked what I saw last night with the second team. Ty Lue wants to run him with the second unit, and that allows James Harden to cook. And I think he also can maybe make that second unit better. That second unit, though, takes a blow right now with Mason Plumlee. It didn't look good, Zach. I mean, I've watched Mason Plumlee most of his career. I was there with him in Brooklyn his rookie year. I've rarely ever seen him stay down on the floor like that, and never seen him carried off like that.
Well, let's start there at the center position, because if he's out for an extended period of time, it means something to their team. They still have a chip or two to play on the trade market. And if they stabilize and they're good, not great, but good, and they think, well, we're pretty much all the way in and we're good, but we're not great. Like, we're kind of pessimistic of how we would match up with Denver, who's just eaten our lunch and spit it in our face for 4 years now, almost, dating to the bubble. And I think part of the reason they made this trade was they look below Denver and see kind of a void. The Suns we haven't really seen yet. Everyone in the West is kind of up and down right now. They say, well, why can't we be, a top 4 team in the West? Like that we could be. Look at the landscape. I just think that center position is really interesting to watch, because they have that 2030 first round pick, and Zoo is good. You know what I kept thinking about last night, and since they made this trade, Jonas Valanciunas, and how the Raptors, when they really went for it, kind of decided you're pretty good, big fella, but like championship, like when it gets real hard and when the defenses get real good, we just need someone who's a little better in traffic, a little better in high stress situations, a little better of a ball mover and a passer under pressure. And they went out and got Marc Gasol. And I just keep thinking about that trade because Zoo, I like Zoo. Zoo's really good. His contract is like beyond really good. It's one of the all-time great steal heist trades in like niche NBA trade history. The Mike Muscala for Zoo trade. Hat tip Lakers. And Zoo's fine. Like he's a good screener and dive guy. I think one of the things last night exposed, and one of the things that's going to be an issue, not an issue, but interesting going forward as this team evolves into more of a traditional pick and roll team, is he's just an okay passer in open space. He like what the first turnover of the game, I think, was a Harden Zoo pick and roll. They blitzed Harden, bounce pass to Zoo. Russ is in the dunker spot. He tries to thread that ball to Russ, and it gets stolen away. He had a couple other turnovers trying to pay. And he's just like a beat. He just needs to be a little faster. And you know what? You know what Zoo may just end up being? A really good, like an okay starting center who should really be a backup center on a great team. I don't know that that's the case, but that's a position where, like, particularly if Mason's out, they obviously have PJ Tucker who can play some small ball five, and we'll see that. We didn't see it for more than like a minute in the debut of Harden. We'll see more of that. I could see them sniffing around. They're going to sniff around for a big man upgrade, whether it's a center or a stretch four. And that's I kept thinking about that Jonas Valanciunas trade last night. But look, on that's the center thing. We all hope Mason's okay. That you just never like to see. It's just I'm dangerous is like, I'm not painting Julius Randle with the dangerous brush. It's just like it's a scary play to see, and you see it happening in real time, and you understand like he had the ball basically. Julius Randle was touching the ball and kind of stumbled, and so there's no maliciousness there, but we've seen this with over and over with. It's just a scary injury. But the word I kept thinking about when they made the trade was disjointed. And like the talent is the talent. And yes, the Clippers have needed a passer for so long, and they have plenty of shooting. Disjointed just meant to me like there's just so many questions that need to be solved. One of them is just Russ. Like, what is Russ doing now that you've introduced this other ball handler? They need Russ's pace. They need his ferocity. But Russ and a center, it's just going to get a little cramped sometimes. And I think when Terrence Mann comes back, that's going to be an interesting debate about who the fifth starter should be. Are they just going to ride with Russ? I have already said, like, I would try Terrence Mann, but the toothpaste may be already too far out of the tube with Russ as a starter, and that's fine. He's like played very well for them. And those Nets teams, to go back to that comparison that the Clippers seem very eager to make, like Durant and Kyrie as shooting decision makers and Kyrie as a ball handler, they just play with a lot of zip, and Kawhi is a very deliberate player. Like the Nets did not have a non-shooter like Russ on the perimeter, and they did not have a second very deliberate kind of player around Harden like the Clippers do. And I just last night, if you could find glimpses, right? You could find glimpses. Like I think your most encouraging glimpse midway through the third quarter, Kawhi and Harden ran a pick and roll. Harden screened for Kawhi, because Kawhi was like, you got Quentin Grimes on you. I can beat the crap out of Quentin Grimes. Come screen for me. Switch, mid-range bully ball jumper over Quentin Grimes. There was like Russ, to his credit, is setting more ball screens than ever in his career as a Clipper. There were PG Russ pick and rolls with Kawhi in one corner and Harden in the other. And boom, Russ would slip and he'd get a layup out of it. Early in the fourth quarter, Harden set a pretty half-hearted pin down screen for Paul George. And it went into a Paul George, Russ, Zoo staggered pick and roll. Russ slipped the pick into open space, made a play. Like those are your sort of moments of encouragement. And there's another play I want to talk about later that they ran a couple of times. But there was like, A, it was inconsistent, and B, there was such like a plodding, station to station element to it. It had no flow, and it's boring nerd basketball talk. But this team, if they're gonna play, and like those kind of plays are the ones that they're gonna need to lean more into. Aside from just like everyone's gonna have to shoot, catch, and shoot threes off Harden pick and rolls. You mentioned the minutes staggering, like all those questions will be answered. Who plays with who and how long? And I have opinions on that, and we'll see how it goes. Those kind of 2-man games where they're cooperating both on and off the ball, they're just going to have to run them with a little more urgency. Like the off ball, if you look at their off ball screening last night, which is like an important element of setting these plays up, they're just kind of meandering in the direction of the guy. There's all that stuff's got to be done with more zip. And look, station to station is the phrase that came to mind. It's hard to win station to station at the highest levels, but then you remind yourself it's the first game. So for James's first game of the season, it's their first game together. Those glimpses are both hopeful, and the way they sprung up within the game was sort of slow and over scripted. Like you need to reach a point as a team where, okay, we run that stuff out of a timeout going through our paces because Ty Lue calls for it. You say, I go here, you go here, I screen here. It has to become part of your identity in a more organic, sort of absorbed into your soul kind of way. And by disjointed, in my pre-debut analysis of the trade, I what I was trying to conjure was like, it's a long journey from where they're starting to that kind of organic flow that they're going to need to have. And it's a really hard journey to make in one season together, given that these guys are always hurt other than Harden. And given that like a Harden Zoo high pick and roll with Kawhi in one corner and PG in the other is like a complete remaking of one portion of your team, it's just going to take a long time. And that was a long time and a lot of questions that you just may never be able to answer satisfactorily.
Well, the good thing is that they made this trade, and they said this 5 games into the season versus, say, with only 20 games to go, like they made their trade last year when they got Plumlee and Eric Gordon, those guys, all those trades that they made. Station to station is so perfect because that's exactly what they did. But I think you can live with station to station. They're not going to become the Golden State Warriors. They can live with station to station if they can take advantage of their mismatches that they're going to have. And I think that's maybe what Ty Lue's envisioning. I think what we have to, I feel a little bit for Ty Lue. Number one, I'm excited for him, but I feel a little bit for him because I think he sees the possibilities. I asked him last night pregame. I said, have you scripted how you're going to use your second team and stagger your stars out? And he said, I've done it 1,000 times because he's had so much time to basically absorb how he thought this trade would look like and what he'd want to do. And I think we saw some interesting lineups last night that he really was like, at one point, they didn't even have any of the point guards out. There was no Westbrook, there was no Harden. It was like George, Leonard, Norm, PJ Tucker, and Plumlee or Zoo. He's definitely experimenting out there. I think he's going to have to do more pick and roll with Harden. I think he's looking forward to that just because of how elite Harden is on that pick and roll. And whether that's a pick and roll with Kawhi or Paul or a big, I think these are things he's going to experiment with. I think he spent
I think last night it was too much big, which is fine, but that's going to render PG and Kawhi in the corners a lot, which is also fine if they're going to shoot. And Paul will shoot. And I want people to go back and watch. There's one possession about halfway through the third quarter where they run a Harden Zoo pick and roll high up in the middle of the floor. PG's on the left wing. Russ is in the left corner. Russ is a decent corner 3-point shooter, by the way. Sneaky thing about Russ.
Yeah.
And Kawhi's in the right corner. James draws 2. Zoo rolls hard. James kicks to Kawhi. Kawhi's open. Catches the ball. He's open. Pass hits him right here. And that's another thing the Clippers have all been talking about since this trade. James hits you here in the hands every single goddamn time. Oh my God. And Julius Randle was about 10 feet away from Kawhi, and Kawhi was like, no, I'm going to pump fake and not do anything. Not do anything, but like it was there for him. And then he pumps, he drives, he draws the defense. He kicks to Harden at the top of the key. Harden catches the ball, shooting pocket right there. He's got 15 to 20 feet of open space. He doesn't take a 3. He pumps. Quentin Grimes closes out. He takes one sideways dribble and takes a leaning 3 that misses. Like if you're going to run a lot of Harden Zoo pick and rolls, one of you two has got to shoot a catch and shoot three and not this leaning off the dribble three. It's just, it's a fun little window into like a little issue they're going to have to solve. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
You know what I'd be interested in, Zach, is to see if James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, when they play pick and roll and Kawhi is the roller, if it can get Kawhi to his mid-range spots. So Ty Lue started this whole training camp emphasizing cutting and passing and backdoor cuts and things like that. He didn't want to be stagnant. He didn't want to have too much of an isolation offense. And then you bring in James Harden, and now you have 4 of the top 12 guys in isolation possessions in the last decade, with James Harden by far number 1. Number 2 is Russell Westbrook, but like by 2,000 possessions fewer, I think, or something like that. But the other night when they were playing the Lakers, I had an agent text me, and you know, it was weird. Kawhi started off the season, I think, really trying to do what Ty Lue wanted, which was cutting, passing, but you didn't see him getting to his mid-range spots as much. He was shooting the three a lot, but not getting like dribble, getting your mid-range spots or catching the ball in the mid-range and working the mid-range until the Laker game. The Laker game, Kawhi started to get back into the mid-range, get in his sweet spots, and I was like, this is good. And you saw at the beginning, he was on fire in that game. But an agent texted me during that game and said, Kawhi has to take like 7 dribbles to get to his spots. You don't see many stars have to do that in today's game. I replied back, well, I don't know, Luka takes a lot of dribbles. Kyrie, you know, obviously the Dallas Mavericks, but I was like, but for the Clippers, it's a good thing when Kawhi gets his spots. I get it. It might take a long time. But now when you add James Harden into the mix, like you said, it feels very station to station. And when that ball goes to Kawhi, he's going to have to get to his mid-range spots. And like last night, he did not start off that game well. He missed a lot of threes. In the second half, they were like, we need to get Kawhi going. What did Kawhi do? He got to his mid-range spots. And I think Ty Lue was asked about this, like, hey, you said all 4 guys have to sacrifice, but in the second half, you dialed up Kawhi's number and it looked like the ball was going to him. Is he the guy that, you know, they're going to have to sacrifice towards? And Ty Lue said, well, yeah, he's our best player. And so I think that they're going to have to find a way to get Kawhi into those mid-range spots a little quicker, probably. Maybe that pick and roll is something they could do that. I think Kawhi probably is going to have to, his sacrifice is going to have to get used to doing more catch and shooting. We know Paul George can do it. Russell Westbrook obviously is going to have to be stationed in the corner, like you said, where he's more underrated. But I think there's a lot more tinkering. I thought this was interesting. I asked Ty Lue last night post-game, how many games in your mind do you think you need to before you know how you're going to have to make this work and how it will work? He interrupted me and said 10. I think 10 games is a pretty fast amount of time for him to realize that. I think what he's doing, though, is saying, I'm going to take this in a 10-game stretch. Whatever I tried in the first 10 games, if it's not working, we'll try something else. I'm not saying the lineup, though. I do think Terrence Mann will be back within those 10 games. He has been practicing on a limited basis. He was named a starter before the regular season. Then he injured himself, and we haven't seen that. Is he a better fit than Russell Westbrook in this 5? Probably so. I don't think Ty Lue, though, can make that change right now. I would not do it. I would not risk losing Russ mentally. I think Russ is very happy. I do think this James Harden thing is shaking things a little bit. And I think Russ is going to try his best. But I think you don't want to lose anybody mentally this early in the season. And I think they're going to have to try Russ in that starting lineup for as long as they can.
Well, look, I mean, it just depends on what kind of work has been done behind the scenes, because the upside, as you said, of this trade being rumored for, I don't know, 4 months, is that the coaches have had a lot of time to talk to the players about, this is what life looks like if this dude gets here. And one of those conversations should have been with Russell Westbrook being like, hey, man, there might be a world where we need you to come off the bench again. If that conversation has happened, like, at least, you know, there's some groundwork laid for it. But you nailed the Ty Lue saying after the game, Kawhi shouldn't be the one who has to sacrifice so much is a nice way of saying he's the best player in the team still. it's a fundamentally difficult basketball problem to get James Harden, give James Harden the ball a lot, and also not have Kawhi Leonard dramatically change the way he plays. Like, it's very hard to do both of those things because James is going to have the ball a lot. He's going to run a ton of pick and roll. Some of it will be with Kawhi. More of it should probably be with Kawhi than we saw in the first game. That's fine. It's one game. That's what I mean by there's just these intractable things that there are only going to be half solutions for. And part of the half solution is like, you just got to execute. Like one of the I watched all their 22 turnovers again this morning. One of them was a blowing up handoff between Zoo and Russ, where the defense, I think DiVincenzo, who was outstanding last night, and hit the closest thing to a dagger when, guess what? James Harden failed to box him out. He rebounded a three and then made a three in the opposite corner. DiVincenzo blows up the handoff. Why does the handoff happen? The handoff happens because the play is a set play where they give the ball to Zoo at the elbow. Russ, who has Jalen Brunson on him, and that's the point, sets a back screen for Kawhi Leonard. The whole point of that play is to put the Knicks in a position where Jalen Brunson either has to switch onto Kawhi Leonard, which is a disaster, or Kawhi Leonard cuts to the rim or somebody cuts open somewhere. The screen is a total non-screen. It misses completely. The Knicks are not compromised at all. Russ jogs into a handoff and it gets blown up by whoever is guarding him. Like that, maybe it was Brunson, I guess. Like, that's the kind of stuff that just needs to be executed better. But like this, it's just a very tricky, like I find it fascinating because it's a very tricky puzzle to solve. And Russ is a very tricky player with which to have around off the ball, hovering here and there, trying to solve it. And it's going to be really interesting. And the size and the rebounding was a glaring thing. But man, by the way, just as an aside, thinking about the Nets, what a week for the Brooklyn Nets. Just what a perfect encapsulation of the Nets and the Clippers are these like parallel weak sisters in their city franchises.
Yeah.
The Nets had to be looking at this week's schedule like, man, we got Milwaukee with Dame and Giannis coming in on Monday. The Barclays Center is going to be rocking. It's never been rocking ever except for a Liberty game. But and then on Wednesday, we get James Harden and the Clippers in their second game together. What a week for us. And then they look at the schedule like, oh my God, James Harden's first game is at New York at Madison Square Garden the day the Bucks are here. And then when he comes here to Barclays Center, Wembanyama's at Madison Square Garden. The Nets just can't get your break. The other thing, I haven't listened to Podcast P, the latest Podcast P, Paul George's podcast. Law Murray, who covers the Clippers for The Athletic, has this excerpt. He tweets it. Paul George on the Podcast P show, watching Harden in practice on Friday. Haven't seen that many lobs since I've been here. Lobby.
We saw one lob last night. It did not work out well. Do you remember that one?
No, but I'm just saying, if you are of the belief that the Clippers are cosmically cursed, and I am not, but some are, my friend and former boss Bill Simmons is just all in on like, something's just wrong with the franchise. I read that excerpt, lobby, and like a chill went down my spine because I immediately thought back to Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan on the bus, Lob City, baby, when Chris Paul's coming. And although that was quite a successful era of Clippers basketball by the sad-ass standards of Clippers basketball pre-2010, it ultimately will be defined as like they still couldn't make the conference finals. Now, this team has already made the conference finals, in 2021. But I read that and I was like, oh, no lob predictions. It's just dredging up ghosts of the past. But look, disappointing debut, clunky debut. The clunks were to be expected. It's just going to be a very interesting puzzle to solve.
Well, I asked James after the game, I said,
lobby.
But by the way, the lob I was talking about, he tried a lob to Zoo and it flew over Zoo's head. And I thought, he probably thought maybe this was a lob that he was throwing for Clint Capella. Because Zoo just wasn't athletic enough to catch that and dunk it. It wasn't a bad pass. It just flew over his head and there was no attempt for it. I asked James after the game, I said, now that you've been on the court with them in a real game, what do you see as the possibilities? Can you see the possibilities? He said, yes, unlimited possibilities. of what they can do together.
See, I could probably picture some limits. That's all about. Like, I could picture some limits in the space-time continuum.
You're putting like basically those speed traps they got on the West Side Highway on the Clippers right now, where you can't like I was in my Uber the other day going to South Street Seaport to do some TV ads, and my Uber driver was going 30 miles an hour. And people are passing us, but I'm so used to, like, when I used to live here in New York, I used to fly down that West Side Highway. I'm like, why is he going 30? And then I see all these like little cameras up high, and the security guard was like, oh yeah, you can't speed on there anymore. You can't even go 45 on 35. They'll ticket you. But I think it's got to be, just like you said, if it's going to be station to station, and I think you will see a lot of that. They got to take advantage of the mismatch that they find on that court.
Yeah, you got to be in the right stations. It's got to be the right stations. At the very least, you got to get it to the right station at the right time.
They will have a mismatch somewhere on the floor with those four guys. They just got to, they got to basically execute. They got to identify that mismatch and attack it as fast as they can. And it did not look good against. I mean, they made the Knicks look great last night.
Well, and just an interesting thing, you mentioned the staggering, and this will all be worked out. My initial opinion was like, they should just stagger Harden and Kawhi as much as possible, because they just both need the ball so much. And last night they played 20 minutes together. Harden and PG played 22 minutes together, so pretty close. But of those 20 minutes that Harden and Kawhi played together, 18 were part of the starting five. So they were pretty dramatically staggered. That starting five was minus 13, I think, in 18.
How many minutes did Russ and PG play together?
Let me tell you.
And then Russ and Harden.
Westbrook and PG, 31 minutes. That was the biggest duo on the team, tied with PG and Kawhi Leonard. PG is like, the guy who just fits with everybody. That's one of his great skills as a basketball player. I
think there's a comfort level there mentally for those two. And then how long did he have Russ and Harden together?
Russ and Harden, 21 minutes. So the other pairings all played about 20 to 22 minutes. Look, we're going to have a long time to dig into this, but it felt like a game last night. Like when Harden came out to warm up, all of a sudden, like, here comes the paparazzi, the NBA version of the baseline paparazzi is like, oh my God. And I was sitting there courtside talking to a scout, and all of a sudden I was like, I got to get out of here. I'm going to be like on all these pregame shows. Any parting thoughts on the Clippers debut, where they go from here? Obviously we're waiting on the Plumlee news and knocking on wood and all of that. Any other parting thoughts?
I think it's going to be fascinating to watch, especially what Ty Lue does. I think Ty Lue right now is a kid in a candy shop, and he's trying to figure out all the rotations, how he's going to make this work. I think he's very excited about that. I don't think they obviously want to win as many games as possible, but I think it's going to take longer than expected. I don't think this is going to happen in 10 games. I just don't. I think Ty Lue may get an idea after 10 games of what he needs to change and tweak and things like that. But I don't think he's going to know after 10 games, like, bingo, it's going to work just like this. So I think it's going to take time, but I find it fascinating. And like I said, I think it makes them better in the Western Conference. Does it make them a championship team? No. Does it give them a chance to get to the Western Conference Finals? Absolutely. Can they still, handle Jokic? No. But nobody else can in the Western Conference, in my mind, at least. You're hoping that when you get to the Western Conference Finals, you don't face Denver and somebody else knocks Denver off, or where you just have to try to figure out how to combat Jokic when you get there, but at least just get there for now. And I think that's what Harden does. He raises the ceiling for them and also helps out Kawhi and Paul.
See, they would, of course, bristle at the "are they a championship contender?" no declaration, because they would answer yes. We in our vision, if this hits, and obviously they have more ifs than any other team in the NBA. Number one of which we've barely talked about: are the stars going to be healthy? But yeah, there's to me, there's just a ton of questions.
When I say championship contender, I measure it to the Denver Nuggets. That's what I think right now. And I think all teams should be measured to the Denver Nuggets. And I just don't see them. I found it interesting, Zach, that I don't know, like, usually after a great player like Nikola Jokic has this incredible historic tear through the playoffs and wins the championship and finals MVP, you tend to see historically NBA teams try to match up with this guy and load up and say, we're going to stop this guy and this is how we're going to do it, or we're going to combat this guy. I didn't see a lot of teams loading up with bigs. I get how the NBA is, this in this era, but you didn't see a lot of NBA teams be like, we need another big to like at least throw at Jokic. Maybe the Lakers did it to a certain degree. Maybe the Kings. I think the Clippers are seeing it that like we're small and like we're going to attack everybody else, but we're not, like, as evidence last night. If they face Nikola Jokic, they're in trouble. They're not going to be able to stop him inside. And so I think you're going to have to double team the heck out of him and then figure everything out. And maybe that's what they're thinking. I think what they also look at is like the way Kawhi Leonard played in those first 2 games last year against Phoenix. If he's healthy, I know had they gotten past Phoenix, had Kawhi Leonard stayed healthy, and they would have faced the Denver Nuggets in the second round. I talked to some Denver people, and Denver people was like, oh, the way Kawhi was playing, he was going to be a problem. They weren't like, they still thought they would get past the Clippers, but they also were like, they recognized like, hey, Kawhi would have been a problem if we faced him in that second round.
Look, I've talked a lot about the whole teams didn't do anything to counter Jokic. I think they did. I just don't think the way you're describing is the way to counter Jokic. But that said, I do think PJ Tucker is a little PJ Tucker on Jokic. We have very limited evidence that it actually is a thing, but it was a thing for a few minutes in Philly last year. A half really. And I think that half meant something to the Clippers in the equation of this trade, even though getting off of PJ Tucker's money was a sort of a mandate for the Sixers the trade. But anyway, we've got a long way to go. Ohm Youngmisuk, you do an outstanding job covering the Clippers. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the Barclays Center on Wednesday where nobody will be except you. You'll have the whole run of the place. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, now it's time to bounce around some of the rest of the teams in the Western Conference that we haven't talked much about. Nobody better to do that with than our own Tim MacMahon. How are you, sir?
Howdy, partner. Doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm good. And look, East teams, I see you. Indiana, number 1 offense in the league, just hung 150-something on Wemby and the Spurs. I see you. We'll get to you. Philly, 5-1, second best net rating in the entire NBA. Joel, 48 points last night. Tyrese Maxey's passing getting better every game. He never turns the ball over. I see you. We've talked a lot about you. We'll get to you. Don't worry. West, Tim MacMahon, you've spent a lot of time around the bearded one. I was in attendance at his debut, long awaited. Kind of a fart of a debut for everybody involved. Do you have any thoughts you wanted to get in?
I would say fart would be an excellent description. I think James Harden is realizing what a bunch of folks with gray in their beards realize is, man, basketball is a tough game to play if you take a while off. So, I'll actually see the Clippers in Dallas Friday. We'll see how much of the rust is chipped off there. At least he looks lean. I don't think necessarily conditioning is a problem in the sense of like he doesn't need to shed weight or any of that kind of stuff, but tough to play at NBA speed when the only thing you've been doing is trying to get your way out of Philly for the last few months.
Hey, look, 17 points on 6 of 9 shooting, good passing. Like he was all right defensively. He was kind of, the effort was there. I thought their effort overall kind of faded as the game went on. First half, I thought he was rotating and they're switching a lot 1 through 4. That switching creates mismatches on the other end. He was trying, they were all trying, and then the defense kind of petered out. I forgot to tell you to mention one thing when I had Ohm on about the Clippers. I felt like an old man last night in terms of a little NBA nostalgia to MacMahon. Would you like to hear how?
Do I have any choice? Of course I
no,
like
you don't. So I spent all this time with Ohm talking about, plays that were emblematic of like, if this is going to work, this is kind of how it's going to work. And I forgot that the first play of the second half, Kawhi got a dunk. And the set was Russ brings the ball up, hands it to Harden, goes down and sets a pin down on the left wing for Kawhi. Kawhi curls around the pin down, catches the ball, has an advantage, goes in the paint and dunks. They ran the same set the next time down the floor. Didn't work as well, but it was a good attempt at synergy, some synergy. And then my brain said, hey, idiot. Hey, we've seen that before, old guy. And then I remembered when all of them were on the Thunder, not Kawhi, obviously. This was their go-to play, this same exact play for a while. And most famously against Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs, Russ would bring the ball up, pitch it to Harden, go down and set a pin down for Kevin Durant and it would be either Tony Parker has to switch on to Kevin Durant or Kawhi's got to chase him over the screen and KD's going to get open. And I thought, wow, what a fun encapsulation of how much NBA history is involved in this weird Clippers super team, that they're running the same set and they're running it for Kawhi Leonard, who used to be the target of it 8, 9, 10 years ago in San Antonio. And it was, again, just kind of slow and station to station, but the right idea, Tim. That's all. Just like start with the right idea. Give me the germ of a right idea.
Listen, right idea. I know they had a little mini camp, 4-day mini camp. Like, there's a reason teams have training camp and even pre-camp workouts. I don't think that we can really jump to any conclusions about the Clippers until probably trade deadline-ish time. I mean, it's
at least a month. At least a month.
And
all right,
interesting to me that they basically are having the rotation to where the second units is Harden's to run instead of what to me would make the most sense, and that's bringing Russ off the bench to run that second unit. Then, obviously you've got ego stuff involved, but again, we'll see how things play out over the next few months there.
We shall see. It is one of the more interesting puzzle pieces, and it might just be one of those puzzle pieces like my daughter got a puzzle a few weeks ago where some of the pieces are big, some of the pieces are tiny, and some of the pieces are medium, and this is supposed to make it like somehow more user friendly. And I'm like, do they fit? Do they work? And maybe it might be that kind of puzzle where you're like, wait, is this a piece from a different puzzle? Had this Donald Duck piece doesn't fit in this Grinch puzzle. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway,
some of the pieces are a puzzle unto themselves.
Wow. Let's just pause on that first. Take that in, people. The Minnesota Timberwolves, as we bounce around some of the top teams in the Western Conference, 4-2, beat Boston and have already beaten Denver. Those teams have one loss apiece, both to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The T-Wolves are 18th in offense and first with a bullet in defense, fourth in net rating. And even though they are winning with defense, to your point about training camps and fit and patience, this is a team that didn't have any of that last year, integrating its two big guys. They're winning with defense. Some of their lineups that are going to have to manufacture points, like the Naz Reid, Gobert, Naz Reid, Cat, like those lineups have been pretty shaky offensively. They're getting lucky with opponent shooting. But Cat and Rudy Gobert on the floor, 117 offensive rating, 108 defensive rating. That's pretty damn good. And Tim MacMahon, I had to check the stats. The Timberwolves of Minnesota, third lowest opponent free throw rate in the entire NBA. This is a team that has just fouled as if fouling is good for eons. 10th in defensive rebounding. They have discovered boxing out and not giving up offensive rebounds all the time. Something interesting is happening here. I was high on the Wolves before the season. I had them as a pretty good bet to be a top 6 seed and potentially home court in the first round. Still kind of a weird team. The Cat Rudy fit is still, you can see him feeling him out. Like Cat's got to space a lot and pick his spots to drive and play bully ball. But something's working here. And I mean, what was working in overtime in the fourth quarter last night was Anthony Edwards just raining jumpers over everybody. But what have you seen?
I mean, two things are working. One, Anthony Edwards, it looks like he's making a leap to being an all-star to an all-NBA player. An all-star to one of the top, fill in the blank. I don't feel like debating the number, but a pretty small number of players in the league. That's one. And related, they will be the best defensive team in the league if they have 3 guys healthy. That's a 3-time defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, who is absolutely an all-defensive candidate, a 6'10" guy who's a hell of a perimeter defender. You don't see that too often. And then Anthony Edwards, who is there a scorer of his caliber who is that capable defensively, that good defensively, who's willing to take the challenge like he did, especially late against Tatum? So they're going to be a great defensive team. They might have 3 all-defensive team players in that starting 5. And, what's interesting, you mentioned the numbers with Rudy and Cat. The offensive numbers, very encouraging, small sample size, blah, blah, blah. Cat has not made shots this season. Cat is shooting in the 30s from the floor, low 20s from three-point range. They beat the Boston Celtics last night when Cat had twice as many turnovers as buckets, also twice as many fouls as buckets. So I think you can look at that a couple of different ways. Cat is going to warm up offensively, like, Spigs promote, self-proclaimed greatest shooting big man of all time. I think that might be a little exaggerated, but he's on the short list. Nobody doubts the man's ability to put the ball in the hole. So the fact that they are 4-2 with arguably the two best wins of the season by any team, without him cooking is really impressive and interesting. So you can say, hey, really impressive, and Cat will get going. The other thing I think you can look at is long-term fit. This is Anthony Edwards' team. That much is obvious.
I'm not going to let you spoil the
Okay.
Timberwolves' optimism by pointing out that this team is financially unviable beyond this season. We're not going to let that cloud our fun. To your point about Cat, I do think that even though the offensive numbers are good, and Gobert looks great, by the way. You know what opponents are shooting at the rim against Gobert?
Not very high, I would guess.
37%. That's like a fake. Is something wrong with the data? Like, that's not even possible. He looks great offensively. He's catching lobs. Rudy's doing Rudy. Rudy is back. Rudy is being Rudy.
Right.
I think Rudy's presence, Cat is kind of the best word. Cat is just frazzled all the time. He looks frazzled. Like, his turnovers are frazzled. His fouls are frazzled. He starts yelling at himself and pulling out his hair literally after mistakes sometimes. And offensively, I think he's trying to figure out, like, hold up, I'm Karl Anthony Towns, and like that dude has the ball all the time, and that other dude is the main screen setter. So I gotta like spot up a lot and then pick my spots. Like, he had 3 straight drives against Drew Holiday in the third quarter last night where he just kind of like caught the ball and was like, I can face this guy up and put him in the basket, even though he's Drew Holiday. I think that's been challenging for him. One thing I'd like to see Chris Finch do is anytime Ant's on the bench, Cat's in the game and he gets to play center. Anytime Cat's on the bench, Ant's in the game. I want no minutes with the two of them on the bench together. Let them each cook independently.
Yeah, Cat needs to have his times where he's the focal point of the offense, and obviously those times are going to be in the 12 minutes per game that Ant rests. The problem with Cat at center is their second best offensive player has been Naz Reid so far this season, and so like I don't want to take minutes away from him. Again, the Cat thing, one, I do think that he will get going, and he's at least going to be a good offensive player, right? And I don't think that I think long term they've got to figure out exactly what fits best around Anthony Edwards. I don't think long term Cat will be part of that. I tell you who will be, though, is Jaden McDaniels, who, it's interesting. Some of our colleagues had their top 25 under 25. McDaniels, I don't believe, made that list, but he's in the conversation. Again, we're talking about one of the best defensive players in the NBA and a developing offensive player. Made some big shots down the stretch last night. I think the other long-term question with this team is obviously point guard. Mike Conley, 36 years old, I think really does a good job kind of keeping the train on track. Gobert definitely benefits from having Conley there as an organizer, as a guy that he has chemistry with. But, obviously he's a stopgap solution. I wonder if their long-term point guard solution is going to be Anthony Edwards. I wonder if he can develop, and, I say point guard, lead guard, right? That's what you're hearing around the league a lot. Obviously, it's what the Suns are doing with Devin Booker. You see it with other teams. I wonder if he can develop enough as a playmaker to where it's just, hey, let's just surround this guy with wings, get another guy with some playmaking ability, but wings who can guard and shoot and make plays and put the ball in his hands and, see how good he can be.
You mentioned Naz Reid. I was one of the minor concerns I had amid my Timberwolves cockeyed optimism is it doesn't seem great that arguably their most important bench player plays the same position as two of their starters, but they've made it work. And last year it didn't work. The Cat Nas Rudy lineups were bad. This year they're both in the positive, and the Nas Cat one is like very much in the positive. We'll see, worth monitoring. But what I've come to like about it is it feels like they have 7 starters between their actual starters and Naz Reid and Kyle Anderson, who just fits like a glove in every possible lineup construction. And one of my favorite little things that the Wolves do is anytime a team plays zone against them, and believe they played Miami already, threw some zone at them, they just bring Kyle Anderson in the game. Like, you go to the center of the foul line and we're going to run our whole zone offense through you. And he just makes the right decision every time. And Jaden McDaniels couldn't agree more. They are, look, Ant will slip up now and then away from the ball. Defensively, on the ball, he is a freaking hellhound, and stood up Tatum with the game on the line last night. Regardless, even like Towns is, let's be generous and say hit or miss defensively. Regardless, they are massive across the board. And like when the ball starts moving around, offenses feel that size. Like all of a sudden there's just like arms and bodies and limbs like in the way and like flying at you that you don't necessarily expect. And you're bang on about Jaden making shots last night. The Celtics disrespected him, put Porzingis on him, put Horford on him when Horford was the center, and said, don't guard him. Just let him shoot. And my favorite play of the game was Ant, left corner, pump fake, drive, one dribble. He didn't overdo it. He didn't overthink it. He didn't wait the extra dribble. Immediate pass across the court to Jaden McDaniels with the defense still rotating away from McDaniels, who drained a three.
He had a couple dishes to McDaniels for threes there late, and McDaniels didn't shoot the ball well for most of the game. But and Ant talked about this after the game. He trusts him, and he says, "Hey, that dude's one of our best players. Like, essentially, if he's open, he's getting the ball. We want him shooting it." And man, they're going to be a tough tandem for a long time to come. I did think, we talked about the financial future moving forward for the Wolves. I thought they got McDaniels on a pretty good number. I thought that was, obviously he's going to make a lot of money. I thought that was a pretty nice number for the Timberwolves.
Totally agree. He's a good player. Now we'll see what he does. Eventually, if one of these high usage players does have to go, or like Conley's a free agent as well, Kyle Anderson's a free agent. Like, we'll see how many ball handlers they have. Jaden McDaniels is going to have to carry a heavier load at some point. He has a kind of a minuscule usage role right now. Look, offensively, again, they're 18th. Their shooting numbers they don't get up a lot of threes, and they don't get to the rim a lot. They've kind of a high turnover team. Like, they've got to get a little cleaner offensively, but the talent, it's not always going to look great, right? It's going to look clunky some nights. It's going to look weird some nights. Cat's going to lumber around and throw some hook passes over his head that hit Glenn Taylor in the face. But like,
is Glenn Taylor sitting around?
I see him sitting courtside. But like the talent's there, and like in a West that's kind of muddled below Denver. I kind of like this team. I don't know where it's going, to your point, but you know what, Tim? I'm trying to be a more positive person. I'm just going to enjoy the Timberwolves season. I'm not going to worry. Like, I'm just going to enjoy the season. Okay. Anything else
and the fact of building around what's Ant now 22, like a 22-year-old. I think I'm right on the age, but a young stud. Like, you've got that guy to build around for the next decade. Now, obviously they gave up a lot of assets, et cetera, but man, they're going to have a chance as long as Anthony Edwards is around to be a force. And they feel like they match up well with the Nuggets. It's funny. Everyone talks about how well they played them in the playoffs. And I go back and like, how long did that series last? But they felt like, hey, we match up as well with the Nuggets as anybody. And then one regular season game very early in the season, but they did hand the Nuggets their one loss and, did it in pretty convincing fashion.
There's something about their size and physicality that on the nights when they don't get in their own way, they're just uncomfortable to play against. Like the Nuggets series, I heard the people mocking it, like, oh my God, rarely has more been made of a 5-game series loss. But that was one of those series, like if you watched it, a lot of people check out of a series that goes 3-0 or 2-0, you know where it's going. If you watched it, you saw something. You didn't quite know what, but like that was a real something. And I mentioned they have 7 starters, if you want to look at it that way. 2 of them didn't play that series, including McDaniels. So that meant something to me. It didn't necessarily mean like, wow, what a triumph. Like, just the cat going on Pat Bev's podcast, I think it was, and be like, what we accomplished was almost as equivalent to what the Nuggets accomplished.
That was their play-in title.
let's just have a Tim Connolly's got to sit down and just like, you know what, man, just if a podcast invite comes, I don't even care if it's like our internal team podcast, just like turn that one down, just bag that one for the year. But they're a decent team. Okay, Timberwolves, goodbye. Just one note on Boston, just monitor it. Jason Tatum on the floor, 123 offensive rating, plus 22 per 100 possessions for the season. Early, small sample size, blah, blah, as you said. Jason Tatum off the floor, 107 points per 100 possessions, minus 5 points per 100 possessions net rating. Just something to monitor because they're starting to throw the kitchen sink at the non-Tatum lineups. Drew, you're in. Jalen, you're in. Kristaps, you're in. And like they gotta figure that out. But Boston's awesome. Next, Lakers. 3-4, coming off a thriller, if you like, 2 minutes and 39 seconds of scoreless basketball to end your games, which I did. I thought it was fun. A thrilling loss to the Miami Heat, who are also 3-4. Anthony Davis got hurt again, in and out again, and finally out with a hip strain, apparently not serious. The Lakers have been missing Gabe Vincent, Jaron Vanderbilt, Taurean Prince for some portions of the season, came back last night, and Rui Hachimura, among others. Jackson Hayes didn't play last night either. The Lakers for the season, Mr. MacMahon, and I keep hammering this, and it's like it's boring to keep hammering something, but it just is.
It's a fact.
They're 24th in offense. They were a bad half-court offense last year, regular season and playoffs. They are currently a bad half-court offense, despite having LeBron James and Anthony Davis on their team. If they can't
I thought
find,
you were going to handle the with LeBron, without LeBron numbers, which are also
those are. Would you like to recite them since you brought them up?
I'd have to look it up real quick.
I have them.
Okay, go for it.
For the season, LeBron James on the floor, 114 offensive rating, 104 defensive rating, plus 53 total points in some amount of minutes. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron on the bench, 88 offensive rating. That's hard to do. 125 defensive rating, minus 77 points in 95 minutes. That's like, you might as well play 4 dudes. Just like it wouldn't be much worse than that if you just played 4 guys.
Well, and it's, they come into the season after the opener. Oh yeah, we're going to limit LeBron to 30 minutes per game, and then real quick it's like, no, we're not. We can't. So obviously that's concerning. And look, a big part of their offensive struggles is Austin Reeves, who was awesome last year. Certainly is an ascending talent. He's gotten off to a rough start. I think the haircut has helped. I think it's flopping less now, and it was getting to the point where I was starting to get Alfred Payton. Like, is the hair distracting him? And now it's closer shaven and it's a little less floppy. There you go. And look, last night, the game ends with LeBron making, quote unquote, the right play to get Cam Reddish a wide open 3-pointer with, at the buzzer.
So a lot of Cam Reddish going on right now.
Well, it's Cam Reddish. It's Cam open for a reason, Reddish. A lot of Cam Reddish going on. You say, what the hell is Cam Reddish doing in the game? And then you mention all those guys who were out, and then D'Angelo Russell managed to get himself tossed from that game.
Oh, I forgot about that. He did get tossed. You're right.
So it's like, well, Cam Reddish is in the game because like there weren't a whole lot of other options there, which isn't great. I take a lot of jabs at Christian Wood because I'm a Dallas resident and saw it up close. listen, he has been like the Christian Wood on-off numbers are almost as glaring as the LeBron numbers. He's been everything they could have possibly hoped that he would be so far this season.
I don't think there was any conception within their brain trust that they would be using Christian Wood this much, this late, in this many close games. LeBron, AD, and Wood together at the 3, 4, 5 with Wood spacing and AD rolling, plus 58 in 54 minutes together.
Yeah, and part of it is they you mentioned their injuries. Like, they don't have Vanderbilt, they don't have Hachimura, like they don't have a lot of other options. But he has also earned those minutes. And I mean, you talk about a guy who's playing to stay in the league. Like, he was a September minimum signing. A guy who thought he was an all-star was a September minimum signing. Maybe 8 teams in, this is finally his wake-up call. The talent certainly has never been in question. But as well as he's played, it's a sub 500 team. And it's interesting because they obviously made some significant changes at the trade deadline last year, finished the season strong, made a run to the Western Conference Finals. They got a bronze broom for the most competitive sweep in NBA history.
The Tim MacMahon bronze. I think you created the bronze broom, the Tim MacMahon bronze broom. We just should name it after you.
Wendy was looking for a place to put a banner up, and I just decided to most competitive sweep ever. I just decided to give it, put something in the trophy case instead. But they opted for continuity coming off of all that, right? And this is one of those things where we will never know. But I think if they would have been aggressive in clearing out cap space, that Kyrie, I mean, listen, it's no secret Kyrie Irving had interest in reuniting with LeBron James and vice versa. They couldn't have paid what the Mavericks ended up paying, but they could have gotten reasonably close. And one of the what ifs are, what if they'd have done that? Would they be better off? I tell you this, they wouldn't be one of the worst half-court offensive teams in the league. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to TBD that one. I need a little more time on both fronts. It's weird, though, because they didn't get Kyrie. They didn't go after Kyrie. They did get Gabe Vincent, who's a point guard of, kind of a hybrid guard, let's say. Austin Reeves, who handles the ball a lot. And in fact, LeBron, late in some games, including last night in Miami, kind of handed the offense to Austin Reeves and said, hey, man, this is yours. Take us home, until the last play where obviously it was for LeBron and he dished it to Cam Reddish. And D'Lo, and like the team is kind of built to ease LeBron's ball handling burden and ease him toward the playoffs. And even when he's on the court, his pick and roll volume is down. His post volume is down to almost nothing, unless he has a mismatch, like when he put Josh Richardson in the basket last night and did the muscle flex. That I like. If that's what I do when I score in the post, so I just give a little one of those.
Listen, I do that when I score in the post on my 10-year-old twins, much less on an NBA player. Yes.
Yeah, I've been working out. I haven't been working out. What was I? And even there was a possession in the fourth quarter last night. Someone should Zapruder this. 11:20 left in the fourth quarter. The Lakers are like doing a bunch of stuff. Austin Reeves and D'Lo are like pitching the ball to each other. LeBron stands in the same spot on the right wing behind the 3-point line. And I mean stands, like does not move for like 18 consecutive seconds, is just standing. It could be you or me. Like that's how much he was doing. But then as soon as Austin Reeves starts to drive, he cuts down the slot. Austin Reeves loses the ball. LeBron picks it up and lays it in. But like he's doing he's picking his spots. And by the way, he's almost 40. He's averaging 25 points a game still. And the team is DOA without him, even though they're designed to have all these other ball handlers. It's a strange thing. I just want to see him healthy. Reeves seems to be rounding into form, but look, they're 24th in offense. They're 17th in half court offense. They're 28th in offensive rebounding. They're 29th in 3-point shooting, which is probably a little bit bad luck, but also probably like, yeah, we don't got a lot of lasers. Again, no more lasers. They just can't get where they want to go unless their offense gets better. And that's with LeBron. Without LeBron, their offense is just kind of stuck in mud a lot. And you can tell, although their pace is down this year, That's like when LeBron gets the ball in the open court, he is not stopping. It's my theory is that like he's so old now, and I mean this affectionately, like once he gets moving, it's like I just gotta keep going. Like I'm not stopping. I'm gonna bowl over. He got that charge on Kyle Lowry last night late in the game. It's like I just gotta keep going. I can't stop now.
Once you get past like 40 or 50 miles per hour, the brakes don't work so well.
Yeah, I'm just going. Like we'll do half court the next time. I'm just like I caught the ball on the run.
Well, it's also
I don't
you,
know,
you
man.
get in front of that freight train.
Kyle Lowry did, and he took a charge.
Listen, that's one of the few guys in the league who's willing to do that.
I am not super worried. I mean, I can't ride the AD roller coaster. I think this team will round into form and be a tough team, but you know, a lot of these Western Conference teams, talking to people on the Clippers yesterday in New York, it's like, man, we got to get a top 4 seed, got to get a top 4 seed. We can't come out of the West from 6th, 7th, 8th. It's like, that's going to be the story of the Western Conference.
But the Lakers did last year. They
didn't come out of the West though.
But well, here's the thing. The Lakers aren't beating the Nuggets. I don't give a crap I don't care if they have home court advantage. They're not beating the Nuggets. The Lakers, somebody else would have to knock the Nuggets off for the Lakers to come out of the West. The Lakers.
Well, look, all of these teams, maybe even including Phoenix, who we have not seen at all yet. There's really no point in talking about Phoenix if it's like Kevin Durant passing to Grayson Allen and Josh Okogie and Keita beats Diop and whatever. I mean, we'll see. Nurkic has not looked great though. That's my number one concern for Phoenix. All of these teams are kind of at this point like we kind of hope someone in the Nuggets starting 5 turns an ankle at the wrong time. And by the way, Jamal Murray currently out with a hamstring strain, and the Nuggets did not miss a beat last night against the Pelicans. Shout out to CJ McCollum, who has another collapsed lung issue and will be out for a bit. He missed 18 games, I think, with this equivalent thing a couple of years ago. The Pelicans it's hard to talk about the Pelicans. They just never have their people. It's like just one thing after another.
I do think silver lining to Jamal Murray's hamstring strain, which, you know, Malone has made clear this is going to be a matter of weeks. It's not a tweak, it's a strain. Little silver lining there is it forces Malone to find minutes for Julian Strouder, who was awesome in the preseason and was awesome last night against the Pelicans. And I think that he's going to have to, once Murray comes back, hopefully sooner than later, we'll see. I think he's going to have to continue to find minutes for Strouder. And I think that the one head-scratching roster decision that Calvin Booth has made to me is Zeke Najee's contract extension, because I don't think he needs to be in the rotation.
This is a Zeke Naji-friendly podcast. I will not – there's only a certain amount of guys whose names start with Z in and around the NBA. We're going to support all of them.
I support all Z's, and the man got paid. Good for him. But all season long last year, what are they going to do for the backup center? They're going to play small with Aaron Gordon at the 5, and guess what? That's what they should do now, especially if Strouder is getting on the floor and scoring 21 points in 19 minutes or whatever it was, like he did last night, like he did most of the preseason.
Yeah, AG at the 5, getting back into the swing of the rotation is interesting. I think Zeke Najee's been all right. I mean, he's been rolling to the rim more because he's been playing the 5. His threes are down. That's fine. He just doesn't get enough rebounds, and he's very switchable on defense, but he's just not steady enough. He's biting on pump fakes. He's just not big enough yet, or not sort of tough enough on the glass. But we'll see. The Nuggets just roll along. By the way, it's just Pelicans aside. I looked up Zion's shooting numbers at the basket this morning, because every time I watched the Pelicans, and I didn't see the Denver game on a 12-game night, at least for half the game, I'm like, he doesn't quite look the same going up to the rim. Like, he's getting blocked at the rim now and then, and you're like, he just got blocked at the rim. He didn't finish that shot. His shooting percentage at the rim is almost the same. It's like 66, 67%. But his volume of shots at the rim is down, and his volume of shots from like floater range is up significantly, and he's shooting horrible on those shots. Just something I'm monitoring. I don't want to read too much into it because he's obviously missed a lot of time. He's still coming back into peak form, but he hasn't quite looked like the same like, oh my God, there's just nothing you can do with him when he gets ahead of steam. Like, guys are challenging him, and like Clint Capella got him a few times last week in New Orleans. Just something to monitor. We need to talk about an important issue from this Heat Lakers game, Tim.
Okay, here we go.
This Heat culture, court, and jerseys is just, it's just,
They got a damn paragraph written in the lane.
it's just, I like the term heat culture, hashtag heat culture. I do believe, I've said many times, that it's a real thing. You know,
They've got a whole freaking mission statement in the paint.
Ironically, the phrase jumping the shark itself has jumped the shark, but this is the jumping the shark moment for heat culture. The minute you write nastiest team, best conditioned team in the league and put culture on the jerseys, I just think we just got to get through the year. We just got to get through the year, because I can't. It's just a little much, is all I'm saying.
If you want a good laugh, ask PJ Tucker what he thinks about heat culture.
Well, look. Okay, I will the next time I see him.
During his time in Miami, and he's the epitome of heat culture. And I mentioned, I'm like, hey, like, you're like a perfect fit for this whole thing. And he just kind of rolled his eyes, like, heat culture? Like, I've been playing like this my whole career. Like, what is this? You know?
So when I saw the jerseys for the first time, my direct quote to the people I was in the meeting with was, you're going to be able to actually hear the eye rolling from around the country when people see these things. And that was before I saw the court with the paragraph of stuff. Just let heat culture be a talking point and something that you're proud of. Don't.
Hey,
okay.
So people will buy the stuff.
Yeah, you know what? Truthfully, someone with the Heat told me, A, people will buy it, and B, if everybody else hates it, and they will, it sort of fuels our, like, Miami against the world. Nobody understands the Heat, baby. Just really, abomination might be too strong, but it's not great. Any other? I don't know. What we're talking about, the Lakers? I got nothing left to say.
A couple of tangents.
I got nothing left to say about the Lakers. They'll be all right. Just is all right good enough? We'll see.
Yeah.
The Warriors. I haven't talked much about the Warriors. The Warriors beat the Pistons last night. They are 6-2 for the season, 8th in offense, 12th in defense, 7th in net rating. Hard to know what to make of the Warriors because the record is quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul has fit in despite a shooting slump that finally ended last night pretty well. The Warriors are actually
well. Hold on, I'm the CP Sixth Man of the Year campaign manager here. He's been awesome aside from not being able to hit jump shots.
Okay, I respect your campaigning. They are plus 24 with Steph Curry on the bench, which for them is a whole brave new world.
Oh yes.
And that's despite the fact that Steph Curry is just 31 points on 53% shooting, 48% on threes. On threes, he's shooting 48%. Those are the 3-point shots, the ones that are long. He's made half of them. 64% on twos, 91% at the line. I just have the letters LOL written on my paper next to his shooting numbers. It's just absolutely absurd. And yet, I don't know about you. And I had the Warriors I had my 4 inner circle contenders were Milwaukee, Boston, Phoenix, Denver. And then I had the Lakers and the Warriors in like the second outer sanctum of contenders. So I was high on them coming into the season. It's a little early. Something just doesn't feel quite right. And it's probably a bunch of little somethings, including the fact
it's a big something. Andrew Wiggins has been terrible. Andrew Wiggins has been abysmal so far this season. They're absolutely contenders. I mean, they're a couple of years off one, and Draymond's playing his way into shape after missing all the time with a sprained ankle. Understandable. Wiggins has got to get it going because they're minus 42 with him on the floor. He's shooting in the low 40s. He's not rebounding.
He's averaging 11 points a game, and he has a rebounding rate of 7%.
No, and like when they won a title, Wiggins was awesome.
I have a friend who lives down the street from me who's 6'5". I think he might be able to have a 7% rebounding rate in the NBA. 7% is like, that's like Muggsy Bogues has a 7% rebounding rate.
Yeah, Wiggins has got to get it going. Draymond has like, it's understandable that he's taken a little while to get into peak form, but this starting lineup that was by far the best lineup in the league last year hasn't been good, and it's real simple. They've got a guy who's performing terribly at small forward, but man, Chris Paul has been phenomenal. 62-6 assist to turnover ratio.
It's ridiculous.
The man has twice as many steals as he does turnovers. And, it took a little bit for him to basically say, all right, I'm coming off the bench, but this is like a perfect situation. Their biggest problem for years, as you mentioned, has been the non-Steph minutes have been really, really problematic. No longer the case. They're winning those minutes. Chris Paul is running the show on the second unit just as well as you would think he would. And they're able to keep his minutes into the 20s, which, knock on wood, will help him stay healthy. Like, the Chris Paul trade so far has been a home run. And if Andrew Wiggins and Draymond get rolling, this is absolutely a contender.
Home run trade. I was a proponent of Chris has to come off the bench from the moment they got him. It didn't make any sense to me. Not any sense. Like, he's good enough to make it work no matter what. And actually, when he's played with Steph and the starters, he kind of adapts to their style a little bit while infusing some of his maniacal precision. And like, their turnover rate, they are 13th in turnover rate, which for them is like, you can throw a parade for being like average or better in turnover rate. They usually throw the ball everywhere. And with Chris on the floor, they would have the best turnover rate in the entire league, basically. So he's doing what you would expect him to do. You mentioned Wiggins. He has been good. Clay has been very uneven, just 16 a game. They have this, like, they're 6-2, but they had the Klay Thompson game winner against Sacramento without De'Aaron Fox. They had the controversial finish against Oklahoma City without SGA. They're just kind of not like, they haven't been like emphatically good, but I trust obviously the infrastructure of this team. The Wiggins thing is really interesting because he was their second best player during the last couple rounds of the playoffs when they won the title. And you would think that would buy him a certain level of institutional trust within the team, but Steve Kerr is like yanking him left and right for crunch time. Like, he is not getting the benefit of, you're one of the guys who gets to play through your more blasé performances if we're going to keep you on the floor. It's like, no, Kuminga's going to play, Peyton's going to play. Like, you're going to sit on the bench in crunch time. It's been interesting to watch.
Well, and I would think it's because those guys are energy guys who are guarding. Like, their defensive rating with Wiggins on the floor is 120.3. And like, you go back to that championship run, he was really good defensively. Like, I think Luka was running out of gas, but he gave Luka problems in the West Finals. And, he had committed to that in the floor. And like, you're not seeing that right now. Again, it's early. And if he gets right, they're tough. The good news is Kuminga is making strides. And it's interesting. I heard Draymond Green talking about this over the summer, maybe even during training camp, whenever it was, just talking about like, hey, say what you want about Chris Paul. He does tend to help young guys grow and develop. And I think you're seeing some of that right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see Steve Kerr go with this bench mob of Chris Paul, Gary Payton II, Moses Moody, Kuminga, and Saric, who's been great for them. I wonder how much staying power that lineup has, like, just none of the starters on the floor. It's been uneven offensively, and Chris has not found great pick and roll chemistry with either Saric, who's a popper, or Kuminga, who's kind of a roller if he has space. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that's giving me not pause, because I love, like, the Warriors are. In fact, I love when Steve Kerr kind of had his mission statement the other day when he was like, the team that couldn't close games last year, that was the anomaly. This is who we are. This is who we've been. I liked that kind of like bravado from
It's
him.
not a mission. It's not a mission statement until I see it in their lane.
Oh, that's just fair. I think more broadly, if there's something that just gnaws at my gut, they still, and it's early, they didn't have this last year either. They don't have a go-to Draymond at center lineup that they have like, this is our go-to death lineup. It's either Peyton with the starters in place of Looney and two non-shooters on the floor. And sometimes they make that work because Draymond is such a dynamic passer and Peyton can cut across the baseline for lobs. They've been doing this, let's excising Wiggins and playing four guards, Steph, Clay, GP2, and Chris Paul with Draymond. That's too small. Kuminga and Draymond is the same non-shooter problem, or two non-shooters problem. Moody, they haven't really just tried Moody and shifting Wiggins to the four. They haven't tried that much. Like it sounds ridiculous, but Otto Porter as the fifth guy, just making that lineup construction viable was a big deal for them in their championship run. And they just haven't, they have a whole season to land on one or two of them. Like, and that search is interesting to me.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the Hoop Collective the other night after they got kind of beat up by the Cavs, obviously a bigger team. But like when they play small, they are super small now. The death lineup was quote unquote playing small, but it wasn't that small of a lineup. Like you had Kevin Durant in there that whatever you want to say is 7 feet tall. Iguodala was a big physical 6'6". And especially if Chris Paul's in there, like that is a super small lineup at this point. So that is one thing certainly that they've got to figure out. But Steph is still like peak superstar.
It's ridiculous.
In the non-Jokic MVP candidate conversation type of guy. And I just think that Chris Paul's been a phenomenal fit and is exactly what they needed in that role coming off the bench.
Let me ask you this: Has Steph ever done the thing where he looks at the bench or the crowd while his 3-point shot is in the air and it doesn't go in? Like he's right every time. Has it ever happened that he's wrong?
Yeah, has he ever Jordan Pooled? Is that what you're asking me?
Nick Young would be the most famous example of this. Like I don't know how you can always be right.
100% on those, but I would say, if he's turning around, there's a pretty good chance that that thing's splashing through the net.
I need someone who's just very internet savvy and can queue up. I just need someone to find me evidence that he's been wrong once, because every time he turns around, he looks at the baseline, he's in the corner, he looks at his bench, it goes in. I'm like, how? Like just by chance one of these would miss. He's absolutely just ridiculous to watch. Yeah, I mean, it's too early to talk about MVPs. By the way, Cleveland, you mentioned Cleveland. I just, as an aside, I saw that game. I was very curious to see that game because I think it was only their second one, or maybe they're even their first, with all four of their core star players, if you count Jared Allen among their core stars. And grandfather, I mean, he made an all-star game. And it was the first time I've watched them play this year that A, I enjoyed watching them play, and B, they kind of played like the team that I think they're going to have to be to get further in the playoffs, to be, or even to win like 50 games. Like I think they should be able to, as well as Donovan Mitchell has been playing, and he's been unbelievable. His shot making has been unbelievable. There's just been like a lot of Donovan Mitchell, just a lot of dribbling, a lot of ISO, a lot of jacking up step back threes, and it's fine. It's been working, and Garland's missed a lot of games, and Jared Allen's missed a lot of games, and they've needed Karis LeVert missed a couple games, at least one. They've needed him to do it. But I was happy to see that when they had the whole band back together, he was getting off the ball earlier, moving it. Everyone was moving around. The ball was pinging around. It's like, okay, bottled that. And they, like, the Warriors are good, and the Cavs were kind of up by 10 to 12 that entire game. Like, they kind of controlled that entire game. Bottled that, and the Cavs can be interesting this year.
Yeah, I I do question long term whether Mobley's going to end up needing to be a full-time five. Um, that's not a decision that's going to be made over the next couple of months. They got a little look at him, but like you said, they had a lot of injuries when he was playing the five. But unless he develops into at least a decent shooter, I think that's going to be a difficult fit as far as giving them a chance to make a deep playoff run.
I think the whole thing is really interesting. The whole construction of the team. I mean, obviously, the Donovan Mitchell stuff. Josh Hart even joked about how the New York Donovan Mitchell stuff will never go away, and I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But I do think, like, okay, that those are two undersized guards who are not quite duplicative on offense. I think they're actually different enough offensively in terms of their mindsets and their games that it can work. But size wise, it is what it is. And I think there are times where Garland feels a little bit minimized there by Donovan's just giant supernova presence. And, Mobley at the five, everyone kind of wants to speak that into existence. And I get that. And maybe that is where he is in the future, but we're already seeing in Memphis, like Jaren Jackson Jr. at the five is like a heavy minutes thing, isn't working yet. And Mobley is, like, if you're going to play Mobley at the five, I think you need more size at the 2, 3, 4 than the Cavs currently have, like by a lot. But this is a discussion to me that's years away from being a real, viable thing. But yeah, I get it. Two non-shooters up front, it's difficult.
Yeah, the one big difference between Mobley and Jaren Jackson Jr. is that Mobley rebounds.
He doesn't foul himself into foul trouble.
Right. That's what makes the five just a no-go for Jaren Jackson Jr. is, for whatever reason, at his size, with his athleticism, he's just not a rebounder. And
Give me 3 minutes before we go on your hometown Dallas Mavericks, who are 6-1.
6-1, and
fourth in offense, 19th in defense, 6th in net rating. And that 4th and 19th is kind of about, like, if it were 4th and 13th, you'd be real happy. Kyrie's missed some games. Luka looks unbelievable. Give me a couple. You see these guys up close. Give me a couple minutes.
Yeah, Kyrie's missed some games. Last night, second half in Orlando is the first time this year where he's like, "Ooh, okay, boy, that's Kyrie Irving." Also missed time during preseason because of a groin and the foot. Grant Williams been a phenomenal fit. I think he's been critical as a culture guy. In a lot of ways, I think he gives them what Jalen Brunson used to do as far as he's a yapper more than Brunson.
Sorry, you mentioned Jalen Brunson. I got a drink. Every Mavs segment that mentions Jalen Brunson, drink.
But the culture was bad last year. It was off. They needed that connector in the locker room, on the floor. Grant Williams has given them that, and he's shooting 50-something% on threes, getting wide open looks, courtesy primarily of Luka. Luka came in shape. That certainly helped. Derek Lively II, there's been a couple games, including last night in Orlando, where he's gotten in foul trouble. That was a big concern with him.
Rookie bigs, man. It's coming. Like, the ups and downs are coming. As great, as exciting as the highs are, the lows are coming. That's life.
Especially a teenage rookie big, a one and done rookie big who didn't play a whole lot of Duke. But man, he's had the 3 of these games. He's been one of the major factors in them winning, and he is 7'1", 240. Great hands, can jump out of the gym. The potential with him and Luka as a pick and roll tandem is pretty damn good. He's made some plays. Had 6 assists against the Bulls, making some plays out of the short roll that you don't expect to see from a lob threat rookie, and seems to be about all the right stuff. Orlando was the only plus 500 team that they've beaten. That solid win on a back-to-back. We'll see how this team looks when the schedule gets tough. But I will say this: I think this is a team that, for a lot of reasons, including the way last season ended, needed to get off to a good start, and they sure as hell have done that at 6-1.
Yeah, I said this last week. We can kind of chuckle about the schedule and they've played an easy schedule, but like this is a team that lost to bad teams regularly last year, and they're beating bad teams this year. And in the West, every win matters. Like you're 6-1, you've given yourself, even through 7 games, like a little cushion to take a bad luck buzzer beater loss, a 4-game ankle sprain to Grant Williams, whatever. Like you got a little cushion built up. I just thought, I saw I didn't see last night's game yet, but I saw Charlotte, they rallied from behind to beat the Charlotte Hornets at home the other day. Again, like you're not psyched that you had to really dig out a win at home against the Hornets, but I found it interesting that down the stretch of that game, the Hornets had Brandon Miller guarding Kyrie and LaMelo Ball guarding Tim Hardaway Jr., who has accepted a bench role that I don't think he's psyched about, but he's accepted and has done pretty well.
Yeah, he's fine with it.
Yeah.
Fine with it, yeah.
And so they had LaMelo and Tim Hardaway Jr., and so the Mavs, Luka, was basically like, all right, I'm just going to call Tim Hardaway Jr. up to set a pick for me every single possession down the floor because I want to go at LaMelo Ball. And LaMelo Ball has made some really good defensive. He had a game-saving defensive play the other day. But, Luka's Luka. It's a tough matchup for LaMelo. And you watch and you're like, all right, so what's Kyrie doing? And Kyrie's in the right corner, and you see him, like, the degree of readiness that he had, like when the ball was going to come to him, he was ready to make a play. He was engaged. He was talking to people, directing people where to be. And it's just interesting to me that it was an interesting little window into there has never been for 1 second a question of who's going to have the ball all the time. Like Kyrie has fit around a Luka Doncic universe. It's his team. It's his universe. He's the sun. The solar system is him. And Kyrie's had to kind of pick his spots and like everybody wants this magical synergy between the two of them. And I do think they will get to a point where they run more 2-man game together when the mismatch hunting dictates that it should be Kyrie coming to set screens for Luka. There will be games like that. That wasn't one of those games. But I just think Luka is so good and Kyrie is so dangerous even in that secondary role and then taking over when Luka hits the bench. It's like they're starting Derrick Jones Jr., Derek Lively, and Grant Williams, and this is a top 5 offense. Luka is just a walking top 5 offense.
Yeah, and I personally think Josh Green should be starting.
Me too.
But whatever. He's been good for them too, and they with Josh Green, with Lively, Grant Williams is only 24, Luka's 24, Jaden Hardy's contributing off the bench. They've got this young core that has a chance to grow around Luka if they win enough where everything's good and there's no reason for him to look elsewhere. And the other thing, just real quick, last year post Kyrie trade, Luka's banged up, Kyrie's banged up, whatever. 5-11 when those two guys played, and a big part of it was they stunk in clutch situations. The Mavericks are plus 30 in clutch minutes this year. Obviously, we're talking about a small sample size, but they have more than doubled up any other team's plus minus in the clutch so far this year. And last night in Orlando, when they also had to come back from 15 down, but kind of a perfect sequence, one possession, they're trying to throw a late double team to Luka. He whips a pass across the floor to Kyrie, catch and shoot 3, swish. Next possession, Kyrie gets it, boom. They're off and running. Luka running the floor, catching 3 from Kyrie. And that is the other thing. Luka is in shape. And 30 teams every year talk about playing faster. The Mavericks are actually doing it.
And he's playing defense too. I mean, not every possession, not every game, but like Luka's engaged on defense when he needs to be.
And when he runs back instead of talking to the refs, which continues to be a problem.
I can't talk about that. But you made the actual important point, which is, look, the Mavericks aren't going to win the championship this season. They're probably not going to make the conference finals. I said second round is their ceiling. And maybe it's higher. Maybe we'll see. Like the West is a little murky, whatever. If they come out of this season and Luka looks around and he says, that young guy's pretty good. Okay, Omax Prosper got some minutes late in the season, whatever. We haven't seen him at all. Like, he looks pretty good. This guy's pretty good. Like, okay, Jaden Hardy getting back in the rotation, I think is a big deal after a so-so summer league and training camp that had people there a little bit worried. Like, is he going to get minutes?
Yeah.
If he can look around and be like, something's here that seems sustainable to me, that's the win. Josh Green, like all of, like that's the win. Like the actual wins are good, and the playoff series win would be great. It just if Luka looks around, is like I'm good. Like this looks like a sustainable thing. That's the big W.
Yeah, if he feels like, hey, the front office has made some moves to give me a chance to compete for a championship here in the very near future. That's what needs to happen. And getting Grant Williams, who they're buddies, they're both represented by Bill Duffy. Grant Williams even wears Luka's. Even when he was guarding him last year at the Celtics, he's wearing Luka ones. But that was big, and it was a big risk because it's a 2030 unprotected swap that they gave up to San Antonio in a three-way sign and trade. But man, he's been everything they could ever hope he would be early on. But man, the fact that Derek Lively has contributed as much as he has already is a bonus. If by the end of the season, Luka goes into next summer thinking, man, Lively's a stud and he's a screen setter roller, because Luka asked for a veteran big. They had discussions for DeAndre Ayton. They had discussions for Clint Capella. Ultimately, they didn't get it. If he goes into this summer thinking, man, Derek Lively is exactly the kind of big that I was hoping to get, and he's a dude already, that would be the best possible thing that could happen for the Mavericks, and there's a chance.
Remind me what Kleba's been out with?
He's got I believe it is a dislocated little toe.
Okay.
Yeah, and he went through a workout. He was questionable last night, went through a workout, didn't play, but he'll be back soon. Interesting. He started the opener at center. And you know what? The other thing, in a game like last night, in a game like Memphis, where Lively got in foul trouble, Mavericks fans have been trying to run Dwight Powell out of town for a while, and I get it. Because for a variety of reasons, but he's not a starting center. But it's not his damn fault he had to be.
We're in like 5 years, there's gonna be like a bombshell Wall Street Journal story where like accidentally into the charter of the Dallas Mavericks organization, Mark Cuban by accident like included a clause that Dwight Powell gets ownership of the team in like 2030. It's just, you can't get him away from the team.
We're a decade away from Dwight Powell being the Dallas Mavericks CEO, and I'm only half kidding about that one. But he is one hell of a professional and one of the better backup centers, and I think he's a guy who's a great. I've said this before, people roll their eyes. I think he's the exact kind of guy you want helping Derek Lively develop. And when he gets in foul trouble and he needs to play 30-something minutes, he can step in and do that as well.
I only asked about Kleba because I agree with you. I think the era of Kleba being like a 28 to 30 minute a game playoff guy, like he was when they made the conference finals and they played 5 out, it seems like his body just can't tolerate that anymore. But in spots, I still think he's an important part of their team.
By the way, guess what? Real quick. Raptors coming to town on Wednesday. You know what that means? Dennis Schroeder versus Maxi Kleba, the German beef that kept Kleba off the World Cup roster. Are there going to be fisticuffs and confrontations? I mean, listen, I'll be there to monitor.
Who's got to give the hard foul if Kleba can't play? Who gets deputized to give the hard foul?
Kleba, hey, he's got to come back for this one. He's got to come back for this one.
Well, now I'm excited. Tim MacMahon, no one better to bounce around the Western Conference with. We'll talk about your Jazz and Grizzlies another time when they win more basketball games. It's great to see you, bud.
I always appreciate you having me, and adios amigos.